I think it's crucial that everyone think about coming into work every day and standing up to the status quo. Now, I know that is much easier said than done, especially in an organization which I've heard described internally as a leader in bureaucracy. I love that. I love that, you know, the self-knowledge, I think, is the first step to recovery. So you're on your way with that one. And look, you're not alone. This is the plight of just about every established organization that you come in contact with today. It's just, as I said, it's the structure of the modern organization that was created for a different era. But of course, we're in an era now, call it the creative economy, call it what you will, where the irregular people with the irregular ideas and methods are the ones that create the irregular successes and the irregular profits. It's that message from that famous Apple Think Different campaign. You know, here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the troublemakers, the rebels. They change things. They push things forward. Why? Well, because all change essentially is against the rules. It's changing up how we act from day to day. And it's on this organization, every organization that wants originality and invention and wants to keep up and keep pace and ahead of the pack, really, to fill their organization, or at least make their organization welcome for those rebels, those people who question the status quo and flout convention and experiment fearlessly. And that means you're the people who have to do that. And don't fear, because it's possible, it's absolutely possible and productive to change the system when you don't own the system. This is what lights my eyes up. To go around the world into organizations where people feel powerless to change things because of their system inside a bigger structure, and they find ways to do it and live to tell the tale. And I just want to share a couple stories because I think it's so productive both for the individual and the organization. And the first story is a woman I've gotten to know, Carmen Medina, who in her 32-year career at the CIA, she basically said, I spent my career being a heretic inside the CIA, one of the most tightly controlled organizations in the world. And when she was a senior manager of all the analysts inside the CIA, she helped champion a disruptive clandestine initiative that was all about making the US intelligence community more open, more connected, more adaptable, something that, you know, might be relevant today. But anyway, she helped create something called Intellipedia. Think of it as a wiki for spies, which today has 300,000 members, millions of pages every day, 15,000 edits are made, 1 million instant messages are shared. It's this vibrant community for an organization that was, you know, deeply disconnected and deeply clandestine. Moving on to another story, go from the CIA to IBM, a 100-year-old industrial organization. Go back to the 90s. John Patrick, along with his lieutenant Jane Harper, got obsessed with the web. This thing was coming down the pike and no one was paying attention to it. John got religion. He wrote this electrifying manifesto. He crossed every boundary, flouted convention, ruffled every feather he could inside IBM to really share the gospel of the internet. And most importantly, what he did is he galvanized and recruited this far-flung band of people who became true believers. And what they did is they went out and they educated the clueless and they converted the skeptics, and they just kept pounding this message home. And they also did some things that were pretty you know, interesting without permission. When internet world was coming up, John and Jane spent tens of thousands of money that they didn't actually have budgeted to buy the primo spot at Internet World for an IBM.com that did not exist as of yet. And they took that to Lou Gerstner and said, this is what we're doing. It was a forcing mechanism, and lucky for them, it worked. Moving on to yet another story. So go from CIA to IBM to the Dutch government. None of these are agile startups, right? But there still are rebels and misfits among them. Kim Spinder was an employee of the Dutch ministry a few years ago, when she was really astounded by the fact of how sort of far-flung and disconnected again this organization was. There were offices sort of all over the place. And she thought, wouldn't it be nice to actually know I know who all my colleagues and all my friends are on Facebook, but I don't know who all my colleagues and peers could be inside this far-flung organization that I'm supposed to be making progress in. So she begged, borrowed, and stole and created a simple web app, a little booking application and some social tools that enabled all of these government offices to share space, to share resources, to open up their coffee pot, basically, to their colleagues. It's called Deal Stole, Share, Chair. And now, a few years later, some 400 government offices have signed up. They've opened up their office space. They've opened up their databases. They've offered up their coffee pots, and any person, any civil servant inside the Netherlands can work at any location at any point. And what it's done is it's connected colleagues who were previously totally invisible to each other, and they're now doing all kinds of what Kim calls common sense innovation and collaboration together. So what's the takeaway here? How do you make an impact on the system when you don't control the system? How do you show up, as I said at the beginning, with all of your gifts firing and all of your talents to bear? A couple thoughts spending time with folks like this. And the first one is, it's your responsibility to ask the big questions. The questions that most people sort of leave to the CEO or the senior executives. Jane Harper asked a question like that. She was sort of switched on working with John Patrick at IBM. She became one of those inspired activists. And a couple of years later, in the height of the 90s, when everybody was going to work for a Silicon Valley startup, she said, why would really talented, great young people want to come work for IBM? Join 300,000 foot soldiers inside this traditional company. Why would they want to work here? What turns them on? And out of that question came this sort of experiment around what would the 21st century internship program look like. She created something called Extreme Blue, which is now a centerpiece of the recruitment efforts inside IBM. And I won't go into it, but it's an incredible story, again, of making real change that shakes and impacts the system when you have no power to do it. And then the second thing that I find these folks do is that they're really good at recruiting co-conspirators. If you want to do something big, you better find some friends who are going to help and support you. They don't have to be in your department. They don't even have to be in your company. Carmen Medina said what she did is she formed the Rebel Alliance. And these were folks who were inside the CIA, but also far-flung throughout the U.S. intelligence community. Third, you just have to do something. You have to stage an experiment, start a pilot, launch something small, and when you get a little traction, that's when you can share it with the wider world. In each of these cases, no permission, no budget, just sort of borrowing resources and trying something new and seeing if it would stick. And again, it's not easy. You have to have a lot of sort of emotional resilience to do this, but it's so productive both for you and for your entire organization.